verses 10 through 17. Then Job answered the Lord, I know that you can do all things, and that no purpose of yours can be thwarted. Who is this that hides counsel without knowledge? Therefore I have uttered what I did not understand, things too wonderful for me which I did not know. Hear, and I will speak. I will question you, and you declare to me. I had heard of you by the hearing of the ear, but now my eyes see you. Therefore I despise myself and repent in dust and ashes. And the Lord restored the fortunes of Job when he had prayed for his friends, and the Lord gave Job twice as much as he had before. Then there came to him all his brothers and sisters and all who had known him before, and they ate bread with him in his house. They showed him sympathy and comforted him for all the evil that the Lord had brought upon him. And each of them gave him a piece of money and a gold ring. The Lord blessed the latter days of Job more than his beginning. And he had 14,000 sheep, 6,000 camels, 1,000 yoke of oxen, and 1,000 donkeys. He also had 7 sons and 3 daughters. He named the first Jemimah, the second Keziah, and the third Kiran-Hupuch. And in all the land there were no women so beautiful as Job's daughters. And their father gave them an inheritance along with their brothers. After this, Job lived 140 years and saw his children and his children's children 4 generations. And Job died old and full of days. And the gospel this morning comes to us from Mark chapter 10, verses 46 through 52. Jesus is with his disciples, and they came to Jericho, and he and his disciples and a large crowd were leaving Jericho. Bartimaeus, son of Timaeus, a blind beggar, was sitting by the roadside. When he heard that it was Jesus of Nazareth, he began to shout out and say, Jesus, son of David, have mercy on me. Many sternly ordered him to be quiet, but he cried out even more loudly, Son of David, have mercy on me. Jesus stood still and said, Call him here. And they called the blind man, saying to him, Take heart, get up, he is calling you. So throwing off his cloak, he sprang up and came to Jesus. Then Jesus said to him, What do you want me to do for you? The blind man said to him, My teacher, let me see again. And Jesus said to him, Go, your faith has made you well. Immediately he regained his sight and followed him on the way. And this is the word of God for us, the people of God. So we've been following the story of Job for a couple weeks now. And the story of Job, there was a time in my life when I thought things were terrible. And I was really distraught. And I was disheartened. And I was looking for answers, right? That's what we do when we're distraught. We look for answers. And I thought, well, I'll read the story of Job, and then I will know why bad things happen to good people, because clearly I was a good person, you know. So I wanted to know why do bad things happen? And I thought the Bible has all the answers. And so I read Job. It didn't help. Because the story of Job is confusing. Job has all of this stuff, right? In the first place, it's a poem, which is important. Okay, it's not written in prose. It's not a story that you read. You don't just sit down and read it. That was my first mistake. So the story of Job is, you know, we've gone over it, but it bears repeating because it makes it make more sense. You know, he's got everything, and he loves God. And Satan is in heaven talking to God and saying, oh, sure, Job loves you because he's got everything. Why he's got every reason to love you. You take all that away and he will curse your name. And so God said, okay, let's try it. Which, the whole beginning of the story sort of freaked me out because if God is just letting the devil play games with us, that kind of explains a lot sometimes, but it also was like uncomfortable. I didn't like it. And so, God says you can take everything away from him, but not his life. So everything bad happens to Job. You know, the tent falls down and kills his whole family, except for his wife, who nags at him all the time. His friends, he gets sores all over him, he loses everything. Bad guys come and steal all this stuff. It's bad, right? Bad. And then his friends come to console him and tell him, well, dude, you screwed up. Because otherwise God wouldn't be punishing you like this. Surely you did something wrong. because God punishes sin, and you are clearly being punished. So figure out what you did. His wife tells him he may as well just go curse God and die because his life is ruined. And then a friend comes and starts to tell him some different things. But the whole thing, and then at the end, Job gets it all back. And I know that's not how that works, right? The people in the 1930s that wrote that farther along, they weren't expecting really to see it get better, I don't think, by 1937. I think by 1937 they were thinking it was just going to stay like that forever. And it was just bad, and things were horrible. And the point of that song is not that we'll understand it next week, or that God will fix it for us, that when we're in heaven we'll understand it, and that's going to have to be all we get. We're just going to have to live with it there. The story of Job is interesting, and it turns out that in preparing for this morning, and we've been talking about it, so I felt obligated to finish it up, that what seems like the end of the story is not the end. I was teaching the kids this week about something, and I said, we're in literature. You guys remember way back to school and doing. Sam will know this, right? Sam, when you're in English class, you're reading and you're learning about the storyline, right? The plot, and you have building action, and it rises to a climax, and then there's resolution, and then there's the afterword, the denouement, which is the after it's like wrapping up the loose ends. It turns out that the climax of this story is not Job getting everything back. The climax of this story is when Job says, oh, because there's pages and pages just before what I read, where God answers Job. And Marianne talked about that last week. God says, where were you when I made the heavens and the earth? And he goes on, where were you when I made this? And where were you when I made this? And do you know how this works? And do you know how this works? And God goes on and on and on, and he comes to him in a whirlwind in all his might and glory. So it's not like God is whispering in his ear. God is, you can just picture this storm raging. Anybody see the pictures of the hurricane that hit Mexico this week? That's a whirlwind, right? The biggest hurricane on record, right? That God created all of that. Okay, and God comes to Job in this whirlwind and says, who do you think you're talking to? Basically. And Job says, oh, I have a friend who used to do that. She would get all on a rampage about something, and then somebody would say, somebody took my stuff. Who moves my stuff? I don't know why people always move my stuff. And she'd get all upset, and then somebody would say, well, it's right there where you put it. And she would say, oh. Because really, at that point, what else are you going to say? And that's what Job says. Oh. And then Job says, I don't know what I'm thinking. You're God. How dare I question you? And he says, I have uttered what I did not understand. How often does that happen to us? We curse God, or we curse the circumstances that we're living in if we don't curse God. And we say, you ought to know better than this, and I'm doing this. And that's what Job, right? I was a good person. I did all the right things. I'm blameless, and all this bad stuff's happening to me. And Job says, I uttered things that I did not understand. We say things, and we don't know what it is that we don't know what we're talking about. I teach 8th graders. That happens a lot, right? Kids will come and tell me stuff, and I said, no. I had a kid tell me the other day, they were all upset a couple weeks ago when the news was talking about the Iran nuclear deal. The kids came to me and he said, why are we giving our nuclear weapons to Iran? I said, what? And he was ranting about how bad things were, and I said, you don't know what you're talking about. That's not what's happening. Oh, right? And you explain it. So we rant and we get upset about things that we don't understand. And God knows everything. And who are we to question the ways of God? See, that was my problem. I was looking to understand God, right? All these bad things I thought were happening to me, and I wanted to know why. It's not my place to know why. I'm not God, and I can't be God, and I shouldn't try to be God. And, we keep coming back to it every time we talk. It seems like in Bible study or here, the nature of sin is our wanting to be God. We want to know why this is happening, and we want to know when it's going to stop, and we want to know, we want the details. We want a blow by blow of exactly what God's thinking, and then so we can correct him where he's got it wrong, is really the point, right? I mean, why do we want to know that? So that we can tell God how to do it the right way? And God says, where were you when I created the heavens and the earth? When I set the stars in motion? Were you there to tell me how to do that? So God's a little snarky in this, I think, kind of. But he deserves to be, because he's had all these people tell him what he should do and how he should do it and why he should do it and explain why he's doing everything. And it turns out we don't have the first clue what God is doing. And even if he told us, we wouldn't understand it, which you talked about last week. And then he says, Job says, I had heard of you by the hearing of the ear, but now my eye sees you. Now, in reading the background to this, the eye, we shouldn't take that too literally. In the meaning of the time, the eye was the understanding. So if you say you see something with your eyes, it means you sort of get it. It's what we would say, I understand, or my heart understands. So we hear about God, and we profess faith in God, but then when bad things happen, we yell at God. And so that's when we heard of God, right? But when we can stop and say, oh, wait a minute, you're God, and you know what you're doing, and it's not for me to even know or question, that's when our eye sees God. And it's not our eyeballs, it's our understanding that we see God. And then there are verses that were skipped in this lectionary reading. God is mad. My wrath is kindled against you and your two friends, he says to the guys that were coming to explain to Job why his life was bad. God's mad at them. Now, if God is in the whirlwind saying all this and he's mad at you, that is not a good place to be. And so God says, you fix it. And Job prays for his friends. He prays for the friends that gave him bad advice. He prays because God asked him to. God said, you guys get these sacrifices together, and you go and you ask Job to pray for you. And Job does. So Job is listening to God, and he's praying for these people that really gave him bad advice and made his life even more uncomfortable than it was. Which is interesting. How often are we called to do that? Me, not often. I can't even get along with the royals, right? Much less the anything else. And so yeah. So not that anything I have to say is going to impact the royals in any way at all, I'm sure. But how quick are we to pray for people who we think have given us bad advice or have done us wrong or have, that's not kind of what we're doing. And then the end of the story is it all came around and it was okay. The story is certainly not meant to be a literal story. This isn't a historical story. There probably was no person named Job, and God did not appear to him in a whirlwind. And this is a piece of poetry. It's not meant to be literal that bad things happen to you and you just trust in God and then all your fortunes will be reversed. And there are lots of people that would like to say that, right? They're reading this for human answers. Like, you do what God wants, you just put all your trust in God, and then riches will flow down on you and you will be blessed. Well,
you have to give money to them first.
Well, exactly, you do have to give money to them first, and because that will show that you're being, God. It's not about material things. It's about, do we trust? Who are we? Are we in the right place with God? And then it was interesting, I almost just stopped at the Job reading. Because that's a cool enough story, and it wraps up what we've been talking about, and it really says the right thing. But then I read the gospel, and it's talking about blind Bartimaeus. And Bartimaeus is sitting on the side of the road, just sitting there and begging, because that's what blind people had to do. They begged, they couldn't work, so they just sat there. There were no social programs, you just had to wait for somebody to throw you money. But he hears that Jesus is there, and he's rude. He yells out to Jesus. He yells, have mercy on me. And people are like, hush, you're being annoying. Stop, that's rude. And so he yells louder. And then Jesus says, what do you want? What do you want? And he tells him, and he gets it. And he doesn't get it because he asked for it, or because he was rude, or because he was loud. He gets it because he believed that Jesus could do it. He believed. And so, the Old Testament tells us who God is. And the New Testament tells us how we can interact with God through Jesus Christ. And so, to me, what the story is saying is, God's there. We can trust in God. And it's okay to yell. Job talked back to God. And God did appear to him in a whirlwind and give him the answer, which is a little scary. But God answered Job. And Jesus answered Bartimaeus, even though he was yelling on the side of the road. And so God will answer us too. But what is it that we want? And is it that we want stuff for us? Is it that we want, what is it that we want? Do we want to show that we believe in Jesus Christ? Do we want to show that we believe in God and that we trust that he can do what he says he can do? Do we trust that God's got his purposes and that we don't need to know? See, I'm all about trusting you if I know what you're doing and I think what you're doing is right. Now, sure, I trust you, right? Right? But if I'm not sure about you, I'm not sure that I'm going to trust you. So do we trust God or not? Even if what we see happening doesn't look right, do we trust that God knows what he's doing? Or do we say, yeah, God, you know what you're doing so long as it fits in with my idea of how it should work. Then I trust you. Well, that's not really trust, is it? That's micromanaging, okay? I happen to be really good at that. Excellent micromanager, okay? And so, yeah, I trust people to do stuff for me. Okay, so long as I'm watching and you're doing it exactly like I would do it. Yeah, I trust you, right? That's not what God's calling us to do. God is calling us to trust him even if we don't see it. Maybe especially when we don't see it. Are we blind like Bartimaeus? We don't see. And we're just yelling on the side of the road. What is it that we're asking for? We want to see. What do we want to see? We want to see Jesus. We want to see God. We want to see with our eyes like Job did, which is not our eyeballs, right? We want to know God. And when we know God, then we can say, I don't know what I'm asking for. I'm asking for things that I don't understand. And yes, I believe in you. And whatever it is that you're doing, you know what you're doing, and I don't need to know. And that's hard. That's hard. And we can only do that with God's grace that he pours down on us. He pours it down on us in a flood. And so we don't have to rely on our own character to trust. We can rely on God's character to trust. And gosh, there isn't a more reliable thing to rely on than God, who made everything, who put the stars in motion. God created everything. He knows what he's doing. And we weren't there to tell him how to do that. And he doesn't need us to tell him how to do this. And that's the answer in Job. It's not why do bad things happen. It's what do we do when bad things happen. Do we trust? Or do we want to micromanage? And what God is asking, and what Jesus says to Bartimaeus, your faith has made you well. So it's not fixing the problem that fixes us. It's our faith that God knows what he's doing that will make us well. Amen.